All right, thank you everyone for coming. It's my pleasure to give this talk. I've been giving overview introductions about the future of vertical flight now for 12 years, since I started as executive director in 2011, and I'm pleased that I'll be introducing my replacement, Angelo Collins, at the end of this talk. So for those of you who don't know, I've got some background information that I'll go through relatively quickly. But for those of you who don't know, the Vertical Flight Society is a tactical society. We were the first helicopter organization founded in February of 1943, so 80 years ago. Originally as American Helicopter Society, but really from the beginning it focused on everything from helicopters, advanced rotorcraft, gyroplanes, gyrocopters, and now things like drones, eVTOL, etc. And we're an educational organization, so we're trying to expand knowledge about vertical flight and promote it around the world, working on things like safety and acceptability, low noise, and we advocate for research and development funding, help to educate and support today's and tomorrow's engineers, and that's really a key part. We bring together people from industry, academia, and government, so we're not an association. Our membership are people, and our students and professors and engineers, innovators, CEOs in NASA, Army, companies, universities around the world. So very broad mix. So I know, many people are just learning about electric VTOL these days. At our second annual Transformative Vertical Flight Conference in 2015, Joby was showing images of their S4 eVTOL aircraft, which you can see here. This is a computational fluid dynamics plot looking at the original version of the S4. So we have a great legacy over the past 80 years, working with NASA, the FAA, Army, supporting their centers of excellence, research work. You may have seen that Joby recently tested a propeller in the National Full-Scale Aerodynamics Complex at NASA Ames, and that wind tunnel wouldn't be there today without the Vertical Flight Society. My predecessor worked with NASA and the Army and Congress, and had when NASA decided they couldn't afford funding anymore, they transferred it to the Army and the Air Force to operate. So it was a great victory, not only for the Department of Defense, but also for new types of vertical flight. I'm here today because in the 1990s I worked in the Joint Strike Fighter Program Office on the STOL, the vertical flight propulsion system. So we've always had a big tent. Even though the name was American Helicopter Society, we always looked at all types of different vertical flight aircraft and vertical takeoff and landing technology. And similarly, we were a big supporter of the V-22 Osprey and tilt rotors for civil purposes. In 1997, we changed the name, or changed our brand, to AHS International to express that we weren't just American, we weren't just helicopters. We had actually thought about changing it to the International Rotorcraft Society for the V-22, but if we had changed it to IRS, nobody would have wanted to have anything to do with us. But similarly, just like we did in the 80s and 90s, we also saw the promise of next generation rotorcraft technologies, what's now future vertical lift. We worked with Congress, we worked with the services, we worked with industry to start to have Congress direct the Defense Department to start the future vertical lift program. We did a lot of work with our members in the Pentagon and the services and in industry to support development of the initial documents that led to the Future Vertical Lift program. So we were very pleased to see that finally result in a development program, the acquisition program, Future Long Range Assault Aircraft, which I'll speak about in a minute. Similarly, 10 years ago now, we saw a lot of activity in the electric vertical flight community. A lot of interest at NASA, industry, universities, and really thought there was a confluence of technologies that were bringing together this revolutionary capability, which we now call eVTOL. That term wasn't coined until the end of 2016, but we really see that fully battery electric, hybrid electric, and hydrogen electric capabilities are really revolutionary. That's a really transformative potential. Just like fly-by-wire can get rid of all the push rods and the mechanical connections, power-by-wire can also get rid of the drive shafts and mechanical connections that are that are the current configurations. And you can then have distributed electric propulsion, put the propulsors around the aircraft and come up with new and very interesting propulsion approaches. So I mentioned we just celebrated our 80th anniversary. We had our first banquet, our first national gathering or international gathering. We did have leading developers and from industry, academia, and government that attended our first annual banquet in 1944. So 70 years later, we had this first transformative vertical flight workshop, and we were limited by the space because we didn't know who would come, and so I went to reach out to my previous employer, Center Technology. They had a conference room that could fit 100 people, so we squeezed 100 people in there, and I don't know, do I have a way to mark? Okay, here it is. Anyway, just 1 second. So right here, can you see that? You see my pen? Yeah, right there is Angelo Collins. He was the administrative chair for that conference. So I'll talk about Angelo a bit more, but there's other leaders of the early pioneers of the eVTOL industry. You see Joe Ben Beavert from Joby, and there's Mark Moore, a lot of other greats, John Piasecki and others. So, as you all know, we have a magazine. We cover lots of different topics. We're really looking at advanced vertical flight. So, technological improvements or technology breakthroughs for helicopters, for advanced rotorcraft, crewed and uncrewed, eVTOL. You can see back in 2016, we started covering eVTOL more on the cover and such, but we still also cover regular helicopters, both in Earth's atmosphere and in Mars. We've done quite a lot of support to the Mars helicopter program. So we have lots of conferences around the world. Our biggest conference is the annual forum. This year it'll be in Palm Beach, Florida, our 79th annual forum. About 1,400 people. We have other meetings about once a month, different places on different topics. We have all of the conference proceedings, so 15,000 technical papers and presentations and such from over 75 years of meetings. So it's quite the amazing resource of information about vertical flight. And then we have a technical journal, so like the Journal of the American Medical Association, we have a journal of still the American Helicopter Society. You can't change the name of a journal once you start it. So here's a bunch of our meetings starting back this year. So autonomous VTOL technical meeting and the electric VTOL symposium. That was our 10th annual electric VTOL symposium. Handling qualities. We have our second annual symposium at the end of the month on hydrogen. So even though we're the Vertical Flight Society, we had the first conference in North America on hydrogen aviation, and one of the first conferences in the world on hydrogen electric. And that's a key differentiator. We're not talking about burning hydrogen in the atmosphere like on jet engines, like for the airliners, but really using hydrogen in fuel cells to generate electricity. Because when you compare batteries to fossil fuels or hydrogen, batteries just really suck. They're just way too heavy to have good performance and economical performance. I mentioned our 79th annual forum. We have another conference we're supporting on hydrogen. It's more an educational conference, and that'll be virtual in June. At Oshkosh, we have the Electric Aircraft Symposium. So that's not just vertical flight, but all types of electric aviation. And we're supporting a number of other conferences around the world. I just want to point out that next year's eVTOL symposium will be in Santa Clara, south part of the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and that is going to be, we're expecting about 700 people or so. So we'll continue, we think, the world's largest and longest running electric VTOL technical meeting. A bit more about VFS. I mentioned we're an educational society, so we have lots of short courses and workshops and things for the current and the future workforce. We have scholarships for engineering students around the world, a student design competition, different materials and outreach for STEM, so that's pre-college. We have a student drone competition, and then different things for supporting the workforce. Last year, the competition was for an eVTOL air taxi for passengers with reduced mobility. So, how do you accommodate somebody that's on crutches or that's got a wheelchair or whatever else needs? Or maybe it's just, if you're a pregnant mother with another toddler and got to worry about the car seat, or a family, how do you deal with these issues? This year, the competition is centered on high-speed vertical takeoff and landing, or HSVTOL. You'll hear that term used more and more. So there's a number of there was a number of studies that have been conducted over the last several years with the Air Force, and now DARPA has also launched a program to look at that. I'm going to talk a bit more about military rotorcraft now. So, this event is primarily civil helicopters. I'm not going to talk about that really much. I'm going to talk about military rotorcraft and eVTOL. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the U.S. military has the finest helicopters in the world, but many of those designs were created and initially flown in the 50s and 60s and 70s. The only really new aircraft that has been deployed in the last several decades is the CH-53 King Stallion. And it's a new, everything's new in it, but it's still the same basic architecture as the CH-53 Sea Stallion 50 years ago. So in 2008, as I mentioned, we convinced some people in Congress to direct the Pentagon to start the Future Vertical Lift program. And after about 5 years or so, they came up with these different capability sets. Originally, they were looking at light, medium, and heavy, but they realized that there's a greater differentiation between some of those different sizes. In parallel, the Army started a program called Joint Multi-Role Technology Demonstrations in that 30,000-pound class. There were 4 contractors or teams that were awarded in 2011, and those have now resulted in 2 companies with a fly-off, and those demonstrators then informed the proposals for operational aircraft. So you see on the top, those are the vision vehicles for what became, was for the capability set 3. So you see like a utility transport helicopter on the left, on the top left, and then an attack helicopter on the bottom right, or on the right. So originally it was looking at both replacing the Black Hawk and the Apache, and they decided at a certain point, it was April of 2018, that they would, instead of doing this joint thing with everybody, the Army was going to focus on 2 missions: the Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft, which meant carrying crew in an assault and dropping the Apache replacement, and then the smaller attack FARA. So it's sort of capability set 3 and capability set 1. Now, meanwhile, the Navy is looking to replace its Seahawks and Fire Scouts. They're working on what's now called the FEL Maritime Strike, and the Marine Corps is looking at replacing helicopters with basically it was the attack utility replacement aircraft, so replacing the UH-1 and the AH-1, but now they're calling it Future Vertical Lift Family of Systems. So it's they used to have it used to be FARA, FLRAA, ARA, and whatever else, but they've digressed or diverged. So as mentioned, for 5 years, the JMR program was developing the demonstrators. So this is the Bell V-280 Valor. Sikorsky with Boeing had their SB-1 Defiance. So these were the two demonstrators. In December, the Army selected the Valor to proceed into as the selected company to be developed into the future long-range assault aircraft. Sikorsky with Boeing has protested that decision, and the General Accountability Office has until April 7th to determine whether it will sustain the protest. So was there something that was done wrong that should be done over or not? And hopefully before April 7th, but no later than April 7th, there will be a ruling on that. And if the ruling is in Bell's favor, then they will proceed with the contract. Kind of in limbo right now. Meanwhile, Sikorsky actually in 2010 had started their a smaller aircraft. This was originally called the Light Tactical Helicopter, but on their own, with their own money, they built this S-97 Raider as a demonstrator, and that has supported their effort for what's now the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, which was started in 2018, and is also now down selected to Bell and Sikorsky without Boeing, but Bell and Sikorsky. And this is almost a year old, these pictures now. They've continued to progress. The main thing is they're missing the engine. There's a new engine, the GE T901, which is an improved turbine engine, so much more power and fuel efficiency in the same size as GE's T700 that's used on the Black Hawk and Apaches. And this is just a size comparison, so you get a kind of an idea. So in 2008, Sikorsky built their X2 demonstrator, then 2015, their S-97 Raider demonstrator, and then the Defiant at 30,000 pounds. And you can kind of see the comparison then with the two Bell aircraft and the Leonardo AW609. So this was originally announced in November of 1996 as the Bell Boeing 609. It's had a long history for more than 25 years of development. Part of the problem has been, I'll say, financial. So Boeing dropped out, then they brought in Augusta Westland, and then it became Leonardo, and then Bell got out of it, and then Leonardo redesigned parts of it. But one of the critical factors has been it's supposed to be certificated by the FAA under the powered lift category, and the FAA, in my opinion, did not have enough resources dedicated to finalizing that. So Leonardo has not had the attention or the support of the agency to really answer all their questions. So they kind of get the runaround, well, part 23, 27, 25, 29. So we hope that with this decision that the FAA made last May about powered lift category aircraft for eVTOL, that will finally allow the Leonardo to certificate the 609. And I think they announced last night that they don't think it will be certificated still this year. So I think they're saying in 2024. But Leonardo's been looking at larger aircraft. So the next generation civil tiltrotor is funded. It was funded under Clean Sky 2. That's now called Clean Aviation. And Leonardo is modifying a 609 for the NG CTR. So it's a different tail, it's a different wing, It's non-tilting engines, which really opens things up. If you have to certify an engine to operate in vertical mode, it's very expensive and limits your choices. Whereas if the engine can stay fixed in the horizontal orientation, like most engines are used, then you have a lot more choice and availability. In concert with that, European Union is funding the Airbus Racer, which is a compound helicopter. This was, I think, in the fall, but they have continued progress on the Racer, and that I think is, they're hoping to fly it, I think it's this year. NATO is also looking at next generation rotorcraft capabilities. There's like 900 NATO medium helicopters that are coming to the end of their end of life. These are all types of helicopters. They've been working on this for about 10 years. VFS has supported a lot of the meetings and activities on that. So a year ago, there were 5 nations that pledged funding. There's other countries that are participating as observers, including the U.S. They had a kickoff meeting in the fall. So it's up to the same size as Flora, but one of the key requirements is that it has to fit on a frigate or a destroyer, which means it has to be very compact. So that's really the challenge of how can you have this helicopter or high-speed rotorcraft do lots of great things, but be so compact it can fit in a small hangar, and that's a very difficult design challenge. So pivoting now to eVTOL, we talk about electric VTOL. There's a new term, advanced air mobility, that came out a couple years ago, which it's not a very good name, but it's maybe not any better, not that much worse than we had before, which is urban air mobility, which was looking just at the intra-city aviation. But we look at everything. We look at everything from the small to the large, and electric vertical flight or electric aviation was what we're really interested in because of this transformative capability of distributing the power around the aircraft. It can create all kinds of new designs. And we're not, when we say eVTOL or electric VTOL, we're not saying it has to be a battery. It has to be all electric. If you have an engine generating electricity, hybrid electric, or hydrogen electric fuel cells, it's really more of this breakthrough ability not to have this very powerful turbine engines driving shafts, driving the main gearbox, and things like that. That's really liberating to not be constrained that way. So eVTOL is not a new thing. So here are some. 2011 was like the Big Bang, with a lot of innovations coming out that year. Also, the NASA study that Mark Moore did in 2010 really put this on the board for a lot of people. Top right was the Augusta Wesson Leonardo Project Zero demonstrator, and some of the other really exciting designs. So we've been tracking this now for over a decade. We have what was the world's first website, evtol.news. We've got different social media, online resources for everybody. We never really put any of our articles from our magazine online previously, but for all these eVTOL articles and related, we've posted them online trying to educate everybody on both the promise and the progress, as well as the challenges of electric VTOL. So we're up to almost 800 aircraft that we track. So we really do track everything from the silly to the serious, and probably a majority of them are if not silly, not impractical. But we have a breakdown of these different categories. It's about 800, almost 800 aircraft, of which many companies like Volocopter have a dozen different designs that we keep track of. But so about 375 designers. And this just gives you a glimpse into the curve, like how many aircraft. It's about 2 aircraft a week, a little bit more now. It's been accelerating, but we try to keep track of everything as as something comes out into the public stream. So do you need 788 electric VTOL designs? No. So I recently published something about Otto Lilienthal was wrong. This quote is actually was not actually by him, even though originally published with his name on it. It was actually intended to be a tribute to him and about him by Ferdinand Ferber. But to design an aircraft is nothing, to build one is something, but to fly is everything. Well, it's not everything. There is so much more than just getting an aircraft off the ground, right? So like on this thing on the right-hand side, maybe you could get it off the ground, but why would you want to? So I came up, this is actually, I came up with this when I was at DARPA, where, it's easy to design an aircraft if you don't know how. You don't have to worry about those pesky laws of physics. You see in Star Wars and sci-fi movies that, these are fantastic aircraft. They just get off the ground vertically and they transition. It's a beautiful thing, but it doesn't work with the physics that we know. You might have heard this before. If you want to end up with a small fortune in aerospace, you need to start out with a large one. Aerospace projects are very expensive, and if you're human rating the aircraft and certifying them, it takes a lot of money, and we estimate it's generally rule of thumb, about $1 billion a decade, and about 1,000 personnel to do that. And that's just the beginning until you start to return, you start to get a return on your investment. So it's a big, it's a heavy lift. But luckily, we have a lot of people now coming into aerospace that made their money out of aerospace. 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to develop an airplane, you had like defense funding. You had, if you're a big, Boeing or Airbus, you could, finance that or get financing from the government. Small startups could do this. But now we have, all these millionaires and whatever else from kind of the app economy. You create some algorithm that allows you to do credit card transactions through PayPal. And next thing you know, you've got an electric car company and you're starting SpaceX, or you got an Amazon and you're starting Blue Origin. So there's a lot of people with money that are really interested in aerospace, and that's fantastic for us. But we're not software, we're hardware, and it's hard. Some of the 5 key challenges, I briefed this. Actually, I briefed this when we were in Atlanta last time for Heli-Expo, which was 2018. At the time, I called it 5 simultaneous miracles, which people said was a little too negative. So it's 5 key challenges. You got the technologies, batteries, motors. You got to scale it up. Pilot plus 4 passengers. That was kind of on the ragged edge of what we thought was possible. It's also an extreme for how much noise it produces. The bigger you are, no matter what you do, you're going to be louder for the same, capabilities. There's the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, vertiports. There's the air traffic management or UAS traffic management. So there's all these infrastructure hurdles. If anybody was able to go to the infrastructure, the AAM showcase this afternoon, we hired Rex Alexander as our infrastructure advisor 4 years ago to help work on this on this challenge. And we've had several workshops. We're going to have our 7th workshop will be this fall with the FAA near the Tech Center. Standards and regulations, 10 years ago, people kind of laughed about this, but there's been a lot of work been done over the years. The FAA has changed its course on what we thought they were going to do, but we still made a lot of progress there. And they say that they'll be able to start certificating aircraft in next year, by the end of next year. So that's very exciting. And I mentioned noise. There's public acceptance. Yes, you could probably fly 100 aircraft an hour or a day out of this, your local neighborhood vertiport. But do people want that, right? So not in my backyard. And then critically, there's this rush for first mover advantage. It was really bad, 5 years ago when everyone says, "Oh yeah, we're gonna fly, in a couple weeks, and then we're going to be certified next year and start operations." And it was just really not credible. That couple weeks, maybe it was a year until they got it off the ground, and they couldn't get much, more than that. So it's a long, difficult road. And then, of course, we're all probably pretty much convinced that these aircraft can now technologically work. They can fly. They can carry passengers. They can be regulated. They can become, operational and conduct operations. But can they earn money, right? Are they economically viable? Will they return an investment for the stakeholders? Will their operational costs be able to be, will the market allow them to make money with these operations? And those are the big questions. But we should also think about where we are today. So, right now there's public demos of eVTOL aircraft, and so, that's like in the 1930s with helicopters. People are now coming out with kind of their minimum viable products or their first generation aircraft. Others are looking at the next generation aircraft. So you can't really compare today's demonstrators, technology demonstrators, with today's aircraft, with today's helicopters. We got a few more generations in there, but we really think that in the longer term, over the next 5 to 10 years, that eVTOL aircraft will really have a really promising future. And there's a lot of capabilities that they have. They can be much quieter. They can operate where helicopters can't, that are too noisy. If there's a requirement that you can't pollute, that you can't have any tailpipe emissions, you need to be electric. So there's a lot of exciting possibilities. So I picked just a few aircraft as examples, sort of looking at where we are today. So Beta, they have 2 aircraft. They just started flying their second aircraft and been doing some vertical operations. But they've primarily been doing conventional takeoff and landing operations. So they did last year they did a almost 1,400 mile cross country over the period of a week. They did another cross country more recently. They've flown to 8,000 foot altitude. They've done a little bit of hover testing. We'll hear more about them in the next several weeks. And it's all been piloted, so they're very much into manual control. Joby started flying in 2017 with their uncrewed version. They've got almost 1,000 flights, or around 1,000 flights with their full-scale aircraft. They've shown some good performance, 155 miles in an hour and 15 minutes, but with no payload. All of their flights, or I should say almost all of their flights have been without anybody on board. So you can see, everyone's sort of approaching this from different perspectives, but they're really making some good progress that should result in certificated aircraft over the next couple of years. Volocopter, they've got their 2-seat aircraft. They've had over 1,500 flights, both with and without, but primarily without anybody on board. Whisk has done a lot of flights. They're 2-seat aircraft, the Generation 4 and Generation 5 Cora. They've now announced their 6th generation aircraft, which is unnamed. And then Blackfly as a small ultralight category eVTOL, over 30,000 flights. I think primarily without crew, but a lot of flights with somebody on board. And then the last technical part I want to mention is just our hydrogen aviation initiatives. So in 2013, we saw eVTOL, electric vertical flight, as really being a transformative capability. And it took a while before I would ever tell people about this, and before they stopped laughing. So it was really with Uber Elevate in 2016, 2017, when people started to believe that maybe this was actually possible. So we're kind of there with hydrogen electric today. There are a lot of challenges. There's 1,000 reasons why hydrogen electric capabilities won't work. We're trying to bring everybody together so we can solve all these problems. We have 2 different working groups looking at hydrogen, primarily focused on hydrogen electric. We published a white paper. That's actually a typo there. We published a white paper at the end of December on our website, vtol.org/hydrogen. a 40-page white paper on how you would have a multimodal hub for an airport for both hydrogen and electric and kerosene. I mentioned we had the first conference in North America on hydrogen for aviation. We have our next one at the end of this month, again in Long Beach, and working with other groups like SAE International, the Standards Group, to create standards. We're working with, we have people from different hydrogen associations coming to that. So there's been a lot of progress around the world. You see on the bottom, H2Fly is a company based in Stuttgart that has been flying their hydrogen electric aircraft. Europe is really beating the pants off of the US. There is essentially very close to zero federal money going into hydrogen aviation, whereas the UK and the EU are spending billions of dollars on hydrogen aviation. So we're trying to help all companies worldwide and everybody, not just companies but government agencies as well, to learn about hydrogen and the challenges and how we can come together to solve those. So now I'm going to transition. I'm going to introduce Angelo Collins. So I've been the director for 12 years, and it's time to pass the torch. So I announced to the board of directors in November that I was going to be stepping down. We had a competitive down select with really a lot of really top-notch candidates from around the world, VFS members, from people with past experience in NASA as Army helicopter pilots. But the board really wanted to focus on the strategic vision, which is both helicopters and advanced rotorcraft, as well as eVTOL. I'm going to stay on staff. I have no plans, so I'll stay on staff as long as my new boss wants me there. We're going to do question and answer in a minute. Angelo's younger than I am, but I was not this young 12 years ago, so this is what I looked like. But we have very similar backgrounds. So I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and an MBA. I've got 20 years of experience, and I had 20 years of experience before I started in aerospace. I worked for a small consulting company called Center Technology. We did consulting for DARPA and ONR, and I also worked JSF. Worked different advanced VTOL programs. I had been a member of VFS for 15 years, and technical paper author, Vertiflight magazine author. And if you look closely, pretty much the same thing. He got a Master of Engineering Administration instead of Business Administration. But I had 5 more years of experience, but I had been a member for 15 years, technical author. So I'm just going to flip back and forth. So, time to pass the torch. So with that, I'm going to invite Angelo up here, and we can have a little fireside chat. Thank you. Oh, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
You've got a really busy work program that you've put together, consisting of meetings and working with member companies, an awful lot on your plate for a relatively lean organization. Is the idea to sort of keep going broadly in the same direction, or to sort of change out the approach in any way? I'd just be curious to know how you see the future.
You want me to answer that?
Yes. So they like my vision of the society. We codified that in a document in the fall timeframe. We published it, and the board found somebody that they felt was the most representative of that vision. However, we basically have now split the workload between 2 people, and I'm going to enjoy working for Angelo, just like he enjoyed working for me many years ago.
It's a pleasure.
But Angelo used one word in his interview yesterday. So this is 24 hours old.
Sorry, stealing my thunder. keep going.
And Angelo will give his vision for what he sees for
No,
VFS.
go ahead.
And the word, I'm going to screw it up. The word was he thought we should millennialize the society. So I was born in the 60s. I think Gen X. You're
36.
yeah. So you're a Zoomer, I guess.
We're a large generation. We're the future of vertical flight. I'm excited to engage the kids. And that's one of the things I'm going to start. I might take a university tour. There's not that many schools that offer aerospace engineering. But one of the things I think I'll enjoy is engaging even the freshman class, the ENAE 101 classes, Aerospace 101. You got 300 kids in the classroom. Talk to them maybe at the last 5 minutes of the class. It'll be a logistics problem, but engage the kids, introduce them to Vertical Flight Society at a young age, and it will reap benefits, in my opinion, and I'm excited for that. It's something maybe Mike touched on. There's only been 8 executive directors of the Vertical Flight Society in 80 years. And so we're in it for the long game, and we're excited to get, at the kids at their freshman year in college and even earlier. And so that's one of the things. Engaging the kids also to help on the social media front. I'm excited to actually engage the kids, request 15, 30-second type videos that we could share in our social media. Educational videos comparing certain types of helicopters. It'll be educational for them. They'll learn a lot. I think that'll be exciting and beneficial, mutually beneficial. Yeah.
That's good. So just developing that a little bit. I mean, in my experience, when you look at certainly the eVTOL startup companies, I quite quickly noticed that they seem to have a more diverse workforce. They tend to have a younger workforce.
Yeah.
Tend to be more women involved. People of different backgrounds. Could that be sort of a lesson or an example for some of the more traditional mainstream rotorcraft companies that maybe they need to go in that direction and, let's put it bluntly, become a bit less stale, male, and pale?
Yeah.
I'll go first. So, as you know, we've been very active in the workforce and diversity aspect, and we get some pushback about whether are we being woke, right? When there's in the U.S. there's this big anti-woke crusade, but it's really about giving everybody a chance. It is very difficult to change 100-year-old companies or 80-year-old companies and change the culture, both what people look like and how that they think and things like that. So it's much easier if you are starting with 20 people or fewer or whatever, and you staffing up for hundreds. Right? It's very easy. I shouldn't say easy. It's easier for the leadership to emphasize that in hiring. So yes, I think you will look at websites and you will see that Bell, Boeing, Sikorsky, other companies, Airbus, Leonardo, their recruiting materials has people of color, it has women, people with visible disabilities, things like that. So I think there's a general recognition that everyone knows we need to do the right thing, but it is actually hard to do that, especially if you're interviewing and like if I went to interview in a company of all women or any other demographic, right? All old people or all young people that weren't the same, that didn't look like me, right? I mean, that would be maybe take a little bit more thought. That especially if you're interviewing and like if I went to interview in a company of all women or any other demographic, right? All old people or all young people that weren't the same, that didn't look like me, right? I mean, that would be maybe take a little bit more thought.
The challenge with any organization, like a membership-based organization, is that you have people that are coming in and they're at different stages of life, and it's a question of what are their needs. I mean, what are their needs as well as what the organization's needs are. The organization's need is to have membership, but what do you perceive the needs of the younger engineers are? Or they may not be engineers who are coming into this industry. what is it that they need that the society can provide?
But I'd say for starter, they need employment, and I think they need inspiration too. They're not sure what they want to do. And when I was even in high school, I wasn't dead set on becoming an aerospace engineer. And I honestly recall I recall wanting someone to tell me what to do. I'll put it that way. I was even going to become a priest. I'm Greek Orthodox, so I can actually get married and so have some kids and whatnot. But I think the kids are looking for inspiration, and I think vertical flight is a challenging field. It's not easy. And I've been even talking to some folks here that do fixed wing as well, and they're like, I don't understand vertical flight. I understand fixed wing. I don't know how those things fly. And it's a challenge that I think some of these kids, especially if they enter technical fields like aerospace engineering, they're looking for a challenge. And I had quite a few classmates that one of the primary reasons they studied aerospace engineering because it was a challenge. They did other things. I had one friend that was an American Ninja Warrior on the side, rock climbing, like kids that are, yeah. I mean, and so I think they're looking for inspiration. If we can direct those types of kids to vertical flight, then this domain will prosper. So that's one thing I'd like them to do.
I used to tell aerospace engineers that look, if you want something easy, go into hypersonics, right? I mean, it's just flying really fast. It's easy stuff. I mean, this is like so dynamic and unsteady and everything. It's very challenging. Yes, Ian.
What's your views on the various chapters around the world and international relations per se?
I'd first like to meet everyone, and I'm looking forward to meeting the international chapters and the leads for those respective chapters. I mean, we're an international society, and that is, in our name and in our former name, American Helicopter Society International, Vertical Flight Society now. And I certainly see there being a lot of mutual benefit to having the international community involved. We can learn from them, here in the United States, and they can learn from us. And dialogue and communication is a great thing. And so, yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that without putting my foot in my mouth, but I'll do my homework. I have I give myself a good year to get trained up on everything, even engaging with our international partners and learning more about them. Yeah. Speaking of social media, I think we officially accomplished what we needed to at the Heli-Expo, because I just received a request to connect from Jim Viola about 5 minutes ago on LinkedIn.
Cool.
And so I think that's a great start. I'm glad we started the transition here at the Heli-Expo, and I hope that HAI will be a big partner going forward, especially in my tenure. And so, yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, because I posted my videos and photos of the arrivals over the weekend, and there was a lot of likes. There was a lot of
It's great.
There's a lot of love hearts as well. So
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just make this our concluding statement, but another thing that Angelo brought up was, videos. So there are a lot of media organizations and fantastic, and we love working with them. We don't do like breaking news so much. I mean, we'll have a 20-page article on, eVTOL or a company, or 10-page articles. I mean, and we have, we have 15,000 PDFs of papers that are 10 to 20 pages long. So we do the in-depth, the meaty, or if you're a vegetarian, the tofu-y, details and information. And so I have not put video clips like TikTok things, which apparently are, those types of videos are apparently extremely addictive and addicting. So I have not done those, but Angelo was saying, little video clips, that's where you get the likes. If you got, short videos or whatever, that's what people, young people particularly, are very interested in.
I'll say this is not social media for the sake of social media either. If you give these kids topics or specific disciplines of interest, them taking the time to put together a 15 and 30-second video is actually going to be educational for them, regardless of how viral it goes. It'll go hand in hand with things. I know we're talking about social media a lot, but yeah, there's other things we're going to be doing. But yeah.
So I think just to summarize, Angela talked about engagement. You know, we want to get people excited, inspired to, you know, young people to enter vertical flight or stay into vertical flight. We need to hire like 10,000 engineers to meet all the demands for the military rotorcraft development, civil helicopter development, and eVTOL. And those are going to be young people coming in, but also people from other segments coming to vertical flight. So people from airlines, people from automotive, IT, you know, AI. I mean, we need so much, you know, especially eVTOL aircraft, AAM aircraft are so complex. It's not just, you know, turning wrenches and sticking in an engine. It's much more software based and much more sophisticated. So like the Vertical Flight Society, we are a sophisticated organization. And so with that, thank you everybody for coming, and have a great rest of the show.